So here we go with part 12, which hopefully is going to be the last part of breaking down this F1 show special, Abu Dhabi 1 month on. This show created by Sky Sports F1 to try and appease the unrest in social media, and it does nothing of the sort because it's just further lies and they don't address the issues. They claim, oh, we need to address these issues, and they don't. And they just interject with lots of things for you to conflict over in social media, keeping Formula One trending on social media, making the sport money. The advertising spaces attached to the social media. So they've just returned after an advert. I think this is where they introduced Karun Chandok and Anthony Davidson, but we'll have a look. Let's have a look.
Welcome back to the final part of this F1 show special where we've been dissecting the final race of the season. And before we try...
You haven't. You're claiming that that's what you've been doing, but you haven't. You've never exposed the true extent of it, and you've just fluffed around it.
To throw it forward to what we hope will be an exciting new season, an exciting new era, I want to first bring in Anthony Davidson and Karun Chandler. Karun, you are with us in Abu Dhabi. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I'll ask you the same question I asked the guys at the start. Do you think it is one of the greatest injustices in the history of this sport?
It certainly feels like there could have been a fairer outcome. I don't believe it was premeditated.
Was it one of the greatest injustices? Yes or no? There could have been a fairer outcome. Was it one of the greatest? Yes or no? I don't think it was premeditated. Why are you jumping straight to that? Nobody asked you that, Karun.
I don't believe Michael Massey sat there and thought, I've got to figure out a way to make Max Verstappen world champion. I don't think.
You don't think that? Well, the actual empirical evidence would point otherwise, Karun. But you keep trying to point other people in a different direction to that.
I think that was the case. I think there was a lot going on at the end, and he made some wrong decisions.
There was a lot going on at the end. What was this a lot going on at the end? Because it's quite a simple process. Accident on track, deploy the safety car to deal with it, the process of that track getting cleared by the car being removed, the debris being swept away, the barriers being checked. Okay, we're good to hand back. We need to then carry out this procedure before we can resume racing again, which is, now that everything's safe, you can release the lapped cars, keep that safety car on track for a further lap to enable those released cars the opportunity to try and catch the back of the pack. Now we're in a position to resume racing. Oh, actually we can't because it's the end of the race. That's all that was going on. What was this a lot going on there, Karun?
I think there were three things he could have done which were fairer and actually would have been procedurally correct. One is ask the lap cars to go past a lap earlier.
No. And the reason you couldn't, Karun, is just get the camera footage of turn 14. And you will see marshals on the track a lap earlier when you're proposing that these lap cars could have been released the lap earlier. No, you don't know the procedure, do you, Karun? So what you are now put forward to this world as being an expert proposing this as an option that was a viable option. Not a viable option, but you're allowed to present that it is. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. So we'll wipe that one off the slate. So your first of your three options is bollocks. Next.
Because then all the 9 cars would have got past.
There were only 8.
And then he would have also given himself time to follow the regulation about...
To follow the regulation, which you have to do.
The safety car doing 1 extra lap before coming.
What's the purpose of that, Karun? Tell us.
Again, so procedurally, he would have done everything right.
Oh, so you can't tell us the procedure and why it is what it is. Nothing to do with Lando Norris not being left a lap adrift of Gasly, who is previously closer to than Verstappen was to Hamilton. Yeah, there's nothing to do with that. But that was option 1, which was not an option because there were men on track still sweeping up the debris. So that wasn't possible, but you present it as being a possibility. Rubbish. Number 2.
And you just go, you know what? It was bad luck for Lewis that Latifi crashed. That's sport. That's what happens. But that...
Oh, you're still following through on that option 1, which isn't possible. Okay, thank you for that.
Wasn't followed. Having not followed that, he should have just left.
Because he couldn't. because the track wasn't clear, because the clerk of the course, who's responsible for the safety of that track, and who would be held up in a court of law, right, responsible if there were human beings injured as a result of him not carrying out his job. Okay, so no, he's covering it himself. He's making sure that what he needs to do is procedurally correct. So an absolute bullshit suggestion, Karun Chandok. And you're presented as an expert to educate the world about this. Disinformation, damaging.
Left the lap cars in between Lewis and Max, and then it would have been a fair outcome because Max would have had to pass 6 cars. And Ant and I talked about it.
All lies again. So again, you're presenting a option that's not even possible, not even allowed. You cannot resume late racing with those lapped cars in situ. What that situation has produced skewed outcomes. Max Verstappen has now 5. You've said 6 there. There's 5 cars in between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen's car. But in terms of time distance, there is probably about 5 seconds between the two. Okay, because there's approximately half a second to a second between each car as they cross the start finish line. So let's say approximately 5 seconds difference. So Max has been able to close up from 12 seconds behind Hamilton to now 5 or just under 5 seconds behind Hamilton. Lando Norris, who was less than 12 seconds behind Gasly, if he's kept behind Hamilton, not released, is now an entire lap of the track behind Gasly. 1 minute 30 seconds behind Gasly. You're not allowed to do that. Hence, it's not a valid option. That's why you've got safety car regulations. They don't say optional. They don't say, oh, we don't have to do that. It's not mandatory in the regulations. I don't think. It's mandatory. If cars have been lapped and the safety car is deployed, this is what needs to happen before racing can resume. If it can't happen, racing doesn't resume. You continue lapping behind the safety car. That's the way it is. So again, you're presenting a false scenario. You're also presenting that from that, because you follow these false scenarios through as well, you're also presenting that, oh, had they been able to start that last lap like that, it would have been really exciting. No, it wouldn't, because Max can't overtake any of those cars before they cross the start finish line, right? Hamilton's 5 seconds ahead. He would have bolted. The other cars, well, they would have, it's that concertina effect. They would have eventually accelerated one after the other. So there's always a little bit of a time lost and the field starts stringing out. But Max can't overtake that 5th car in that bunch, Vettel, until he's crossed the start finish line, by which stage Lewis is definitely 5 seconds ahead. Even on those soft compound tyres, Max Verstappen's not going to catch Lewis Hamilton by 5 seconds and overtake him in that one lap. Bearing in mind, the last overtaking opportunity is turn 9 of that track. So it's not happening, but you're going to present, oh, had they have done that, which they're not allowed to do, it would have been really exciting. So it's a lie that you then embellish to just create a fictitious scenario, which is totally bullshit as well.
We would have had a superbly exciting final half lap of the race, I think, with the tyre delta.
Stop thinking, because you're not very good at it, Karun, okay? You're just a lying prick. That's all you are.
And the third thing,
a corrupt, lying prick.
I suppose the cleanest thing would have been, which you guys have talked about, is do a red flag. And
it's not a red flag situation. What you'd be doing is misapplying the red flag ruling to create drama. You would not deal with that incident with a red flag at any other Grand Prix of the season. If that situation happened at any lap of any Grand Prix of the season, you wouldn't throw a red flag, because the only reason you'd use a red flag is if the track is fully blocked so that the cars can't get by it safely, and a safety car leading those cars around it can't get by it safely. If there is barrier damage which requires repairs which are going to take a prolonged period of time, and hence you'd say, okay, we're going to red flag that. When I say prolonged period of time, what is standard and what is deemed acceptable is what the average is. On average, these incidents take about 5.5 laps out of a Grand Prix. That's normal. If it's going to take substantially longer, then that would be a grounds to red flag it. It wasn't going to take substantially longer. It's evident that it didn't take substantially longer. Therefore, it's a safety car, it's not a red flag. And the other time you'd use a red flag, if somebody is injured, needed medical attention at the scene, and you didn't want to have motor racing cars travelling by that every couple of minutes as they were lapping by, and it was a critical situation that needed dealing with. You'd want to stop racing for that. So they're the scenarios which you would red flag that race. It was none of them. It was a standard safety car situation, and there wasn't enough laps left to resume racing. It was a safety car finish. One single outcome possible in accordance with the rules and regulations of the sport, and Karun Chandhok has gone, well, there were 3 options, and each of those 3 is not possible. That's the lies that we're getting presented with. This is the mind conditioning that media is giving you. These are the things that they're getting you to argue about in the comment section of social media. This is the conflict that they are creating, overseeing the hatred, overseeing the abuse, overseeing the trolling, because of bastards like this.
And a restart like Baku. So I don't think it was the fairest outcome. I think Lewis did everything right to deserve to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But the World Championship, as Martin said, is decided over 22 races. And I think you can't say that Max Verstappen wasn't a deserving world champion.
You absolutely can. If they've gone into this final decider level on points, you're going to try and say that whilst one guy should have won that decider, the other guy and was robbed, while the other guy overall, the other guy deserved it. Well, that makes no logical sense, does it? And when you also factor in the fact that one of those events, which wasn't a Grand Prix, which wasn't a race, because the Belgian parade was in no way a Grand Prix, was in no way a race. There was no sport that took place. There was no competition. All you saw was a 2-lap parade. It was raining. They decided it wasn't safe to race. So what they did, they paraded those cars around the track where overtaking isn't possible. And they said to the crowd, oh, you've just seen what we constitute as being a race, even though it's not a race. We don't have to refund you your tickets. I'm glad you've had a lovely time. No refunds for you. Max, we give you 12.5 points. Lewis, we give you 7.5 points. Well, Max gets 5 extra points and this title of a race win. So they go into the final Grand Prix of the season level on points, and supposedly Max ahead on 9 wins to Lewis's 8. When you remove that parade, it's 8 wins all, and Lewis is ahead in the championship by 5 points. But Karun wants to tell us, oh, championships are won over the course of the season, and you can't argue that Max didn't fully deserve it over the course of the season. So not only in terms of the points accumulated was Max gifted 5 extra points going into that race, gifted an extra race win, which wasn't a race, meaning that he was willing to try and crash Lewis Hamilton out of the race, knowing full well that had he have done so, he'd have actually won the championship by virtue of this supposed extra race win. He was unable to drive the way he did all season, effectively making Lewis Hamilton deviate his line as he was going through a corner at Spain, running Lewis Hamilton off the track at Imola, running Lewis Hamilton off the track at Monza, parking his car on Lewis Hamilton's head at Monza, running Lewis Hamilton off the track in Brazil, running Lewis Hamilton off the track in Saudi, brake testing Lewis Hamilton in Saudi, running Lewis Hamilton off the track in Abu Dhabi. Oh, Max fully deserved it. Fully deserved it. chopping across the nose of Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone, and Lewis Hamilton getting the blame for that. This is the lies. This is the contrivance. Who at Sky Sports F1, the sports broadcaster, has exposed that? It's all pro Max Verstappen, isn't it? Now this is broadcasting in the UK to a British audience. Why is it you're all kind of fluffing the Belgian Dutch boy? Why is that? Who's paying your wages?
Because, you know, all 22 races count the same.
All 22 races count the same, even when one is a parade. Yeah. Well, if they all count the same, and they're level on points going in, and that's skewed, as I've said, and Lewis Hamilton should have won, and you're still trying to justify that Max deserved it, even though he was gifted it. Strange.
Okay, in that press conference that we heard from Toto, the only time that he's spoken to the public and to the press, Anthony, he did use the word, robbed. You've been into Brackley, you've been in the sim. We'll come on to what the new car feels like in a few moments' time. Is that the general consensus down there from the team?
It's funny, Simon, before the race happened, I said to them, look, what about this predicament where you can choose one? You can choose one winner to win the championship or for Lewis to win the Drivers' Championship. And they all said, without question, without hesitation, we'll take the team constructors, we'll take the constructors. That's where their bonus money is. And it's before Christmas. So they all want this for the pride of the cars that they've worked on in the factory, the pride of those 1,000 people at Brackley. But when push came to shove, of course, they all wanted the Drivers' Championship. That was that.
Have you noticed with all these male talking heads, to demonstrate that you're a real motor racing man, you've got to have a little toy in the background of a car. There you go. Oh, I'm really into my Formula One. I've got a little toy in the back that proves it.
That's the one where you have that prestige. But look, they were really bruised from it. They still are, and rightly so. It was unfair, like Karun said. I think they were really robbed. Lewis was robbed of that race victory, without question. Yes, it was manipulated to finish under racing circumstances with only 5 cars allowed to overtake. Really unfair on the cars who are racing those other 5 cars, in my opinion. If I'd been one of those drivers watching that group of cars overtake, I would have been gutted.
So, if you'd have been the other drivers watching them overtake, you'd have been gutted. Well, what about Lando Norris? So you're saying, if you're Daniel Ricciardo, who is stuck behind Max Verstappen, having seen there's 5 cars ahead of you up the road, Sebastian Vettel being in 11th position, you, Daniel Ricciardo, having changed onto fresh soft compound tyres, and then seeing the car ahead of you and the other 4 all released and you not, you'd feel gutted. Yeah, fair enough, you'd feel gutted. But Lando Norris has gotten out of the way, released, but he's in a race with Pierre Gasly, and he's only allowed to get a third of the way around the track. And the safety cars are coming in this lap, and it's ending. Wow! Well, Norris, is he not gutted as well that he can't challenge for 6th position for more World Championship points? Is he not gutted? And we saw some cars. We saw both AlphaTauris, both of them overtake Valtteri Bottas, because Valtteri was still on his old hard compound tyres, and the 2 AlphaTauris, who were in no way equivalent to Red Bulls, they both got past a Mercedes. So we can see that cars can make up positions. Now, who's to say that Daniel Ricciardo couldn't have overtaken Seb Vettel and Charles Leclerc and got himself in the top 10, a World Championship point? Who's to say that Lando Norris couldn't have overtaken either one of the AlphaTauris, or maybe Bottas as well? Who knows? We'll never know, will we? We'll never know. But Davidson, you don't tell us that aspect of it. You don't expose that aspect, which is really the crux of it.
I'm really disappointed. And there are more than just 2 people in that race, don't forget. So
there we go. This is what I put in my email to Sky Sports. You cannot separate out just two competitors in a multi-competitor event and send them off to race off for the win. That is fixing an outcome to an event. That's fixing it so that only one of two competitors can win. And you know the conditions of those two competitors, knowing one is significant favourite. Essentially, that results in fixing the outcome of a race. And we get an hour and 4 minutes into this presentation before they just brush on mentioning that. Thanks for that. Thanks for acknowledging that point, which is the crux of the matter.
Some really unfair decisions were made all over, I thought, and totally robbed of a race victory. Wasn't robbed of the championship.
Right, he's been robbed of the race victory. Did that race determine the outcome of the championship? Yes. That was billed as the championship decider. They went into that race equal on points, and I've already explained, when really Lewis should be 5 points ahead, level on 8 races each. Was he robbed of that race result? Yes. Was he robbed of the championship? No. How can you say no, dickhead?
That's a different story, because Max had his fair share of bad luck as well.
Oh, because Max had some bad luck. Right, so one is corrupt decision, okay, one's bad luck, okay? Max Verstappen landing on Lewis' head in Monza, was that a corrupt decision? Was that the governing body breaking the rules of the sport to impact the number of points Lewis Hamilton could have achieved at that race? Well, no, they didn't break the rules of the sport. He was involved in an incident where a driver was being reckless and took him out of the race. That's bad luck. But it took points away from Lewis Hamilton, didn't it? Right? What about Max Verstappen? He had a tyre that blew out. We've seen lots of drivers suffer punctures which have impacted the number of points. Oh, but that means he fully deserved the world champion. You tell Nigel Mansell that from about 1986 or something like that. You tell Nigel Mansell he's fully... Well, let's just give him the world championship back then. Back when his tyre blew out in Australia on the last race of the season. Oh, no. We'll just decide. We'll have a vote to decide who we think fully deserves it. Oh, it was bad luck, so we'll just give it him anyway. It's not how it works, is it, dickhead?
Throughout that season, so many occasions where, like the tyre blowout in Baku, for example, being wiped out pretty much of the race in Budapest. None of that was his fault.
So many times, like the tyre and Budapest. Talk us through the times that he was enabled without penalty. So enabled to drive atrociously, right? Contravening all driving standards, driving offences which constitute having race penalties, penalty points on your licence, time penalties in the race where you didn't get them. And we can list Spain, we can list Imola, we can list Monza, we can list France, where he left the track and didn't rejoin in the appropriate manner. Oh, steward's decision, no further action necessary. We can list Brazil, we can list Saudi, we can list Abu Dhabi. We can list Saudi again because there was at least 2 infringements there. Oh, but Max was the one that had so much bad luck. Lewis was the one that got demoted to the back of the grid, yet still won. Despite that.
Lots of bad luck. But in that race, totally robbed for Lewis. So, he's bitter.
So this is narrative, isn't it? Absolute narrative that the strap-on fanboy will hear that and it will be music to their ears. Yes, my favourite fully deserved it. My favourite fully deserved it. My favourite fully deserved it. What are you doing to these people? What are you doing? You're validating a desire with your bullshit.
About it. He's bruised, and I tell you what though, Simon, if one thing to motivate a team, having just won their 8th Constructors' World Championship, because you could get complacent, there's no better way to motivate that team of strong 1,000 people plus.
The one thing's for sure, that will motivate them, having been robbed by a fraudulent event. Oh, thanks for that, Davidson. Thanks for that.
Exactly. To come back this year fighting ever harder than before.
At Bet360.
Just pause this.
The other teams might go on to regret that.
Lewis will be back, won't he? You know he'll be back.
I'm sure he will be. I mean, God, I would want to be. You know, if that just happened to me, who wouldn't want to get back into that?
Well, you didn't win anything when you were a driver, so you know you wouldn't know how it'd feel, would you? Really?
That car this season and go and put things right, because I'm sure that's what he wants to do.
Let's move it on, because we want to, because you know we're going to be talking about this ad nauseum. We're going to be talking about it, I'm sure.
We'll be talking about this ad nauseum until we're sick. Yeah? We're talking about this until we're sick. Deal with it. Expose it for what it is. Stop fluffing it. Stop lying. Stop conditioning the minds. Stop conditioning people to accept it, to look at it as though it's not a crime. Oh, it's just entertainment. It's good for the sport. Oh, let me know what you think in the comments section.
Into the start of next season, but we do have a brand new era of regulations, don't we? Totally changed in terms of aero regulations. 23 races, of course, Ted, including Miami, return of ground effect, underbody tunnels. What can you tell us about these new cars for 2020?
Oh, so this is where they go on to talking about the new season 2022, where the technical regulations have been altered to facilitate Adrian Newey's specialism, in that particular aerodynamic effect, where we've got this cost cap. Well, cost cap was actually for the 2021 season, and we've got the results of that in midway through the 2022 season. So they overspent on their 2021 season, which should have disqualified Red Bull from 2021 anyway. But part of that goes into 2022 car development, which meant that they had an enhanced car in 2022 on top of their specialism with their designer. So that's wonderful, isn't it? And so they try and hype us up and be excited about that. They'll talk about Davidson going in the simulator over at Mercedes and how that was, which evidently wasn't simulating the porpoising and the bouncing. So how useful is the simulator data? Not very, really, if it doesn't replicate real world incidents. So, you know, all this time, oh, we're looking good in the sim, irrelevant. Let's see what it looks like for real when you run it in real time on a real track in real conditions, not computer generated modeling. Okay? Anyway, that'll do for this one. I think they've finished talking about Abu Dhabi. An hour and 5 minutes of an hour and 13-minute long presentation. I'm going to stop this video here. I'm going to continue listening to them last 8 minutes. If there's anything further I need to say, I'll do a final little video. But that should be it. 12 parts to this. 12 parts. Each of them will demonstrate the lies, the bullshit that you've been fed by this corrupt media entity contracted by Liberty Media as the broadcaster for the show of Formula One. And that's all they've done. Lying to fans, conditioning fans of the false narrative, being part of the fraud, part of the fix. Disgusting, every single last one of them. Every single last one of them. Thanks for your time.